AD Frazier returns to the Big Mountain. The 2025 college football season is off to a hot start, and we're back on the Big Mountain with a very special interview. Hey, welcome back to the Big Mountain. I am JY. This is my good friend Steve. As you can see, we are all huskied up here in studio. We have AD Frazier with us. Welcome back to the Big Mountain.
I appreciate it, fellas. It was so good last time, I had to come back. So I appreciate the hospitality, and you guys look really good, and in cardinal and black. I like that. I like that.
As a Penn State fan, I don't wear red very often, so
I bet you
this is
don't.
special for the Huskies.
Well, I appreciate that. I do
Hey, well,
appreciate it.
let's get right into it. We have a whole list of things we'd love to hear from you on, both NIU related and maybe just in a collegiate athletics in general, as you are the president of NACDA. But let's start with NIU here. You know, obviously you're transitioning to the Mountain West in football, the Horizon League here at the end of this school year, this athletic year. Can you give us an update on where you're at here with this transition and how things are going there for you and the Huskies?
Yeah, it's a great opening question. It's a lot. Obviously, the landscape is ever changing, right? We really haven't, even since the last time we spoke, we really haven't had a lot of finality. We do have operational things that are currently going on with obviously rev share and NIL, transfer portal, and the like. But as far as our plans, they're pretty fixed. We have two different transition modes. We have a Mountain West transition team, and then we have a Horizon transition team, right? We will be announcing here very shortly where two of our other sports, we have a wrestling team and gymnastics team that needed to find homes, and we finally procured that, and we're just kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's on those. So they will be in some additional pieces to the overall portfolio of conference affiliation. So that will be happening this month, knock on wood. But to go back to the Mountain West, we've headed by my deputy athletic director, John Cheney. He's overseeing all of those transitional issues. So things like the football schedule, right? Things like dealing with operational budgets, personnel, travel. If you could imagine, now we're going from the Midwest to Hawaii.
Right.
Not necessarily like that, but as our father's mark is a competition. So we're dealing with all of those particular logistical situations and trying to really figure what that looks like, and quite frankly, loading that into our operational budget for the next fiscal year, so we're good to go. And then working with the staff of the Mountain West, who've been just fantastic, Gloria Navarez and all of the different staff members that make up the Mountain West. So we're working with that as well, the do's and don'ts, the etiquette, the expectations. Anytime you go into a conference, and I've had a chance of doing that when I was at Wisconsin, we added Nebraska, we added Rutgers and Maryland. That's during my era of time and in the Big Ten. This is similar in the sense that there are things that are expectations that have to be filled, and then we are now assigning that for our staff who do that within the MAC as well as the other operational pieces on cross campus. So getting to understand that and then articulating that to the campus, right? This is what they do in the Mountain West. Here it is. It might sound silly, but even down to the logos. Is it the Mountain West Conference or is the Mountain West? Well, we found out it's the Mountain West. It's not the Mountain West Conference. All right. So again, just the verbiage, the understanding. And then we have this other piece, which is such a great thing on the Mountain West side, is that we have these marketplaces, right? That these are new location destinations for our alumni, our academic side of the house. So this next year that's coming up, we're going to be exploiting that. I should say it a better way. We're going to capitalize on that as far as having our alumni, because there are intersections of the new footprint that we're getting ready to compete in, where we need to activate our alumni base, so we can get excited about that. That's also brought on new sponsors, new folks that want to invest in NIU and NIU athletics. So that's a lot. Let me stop there because that's what's going on the Mountain West side. I'll shift to Horizon League in a sense that that's been really fluid. We're actually ingrained into a lot of the operational meetings of the Horizon League. As you can imagine, there's more sports that we're involved with. So we're heavily involved in men's and women's basketball and all of the Olympic sports that will be participating. So we've already been asked to attend meetings, to go through certain structures within, the faculty athletic rep and the senior women's administrator and the athletic director. These are all the voting components of the operation. So we're heavily involved. And sometimes, we're coming out of MAC meetings and going into Horizon meetings. So we're meeting up. We meet to meet again, so to speak, when it comes to this structure. So we're heavily engaged in that. And the Horizon did not want to wait. They wanted to invite us right away into that structure because of the number of sports that we currently have and the expectations around that. So let me stop there and see if I can fill any holes that you might have.
Mm-hmm. Well, quick follow-up question on that, AD Frazier. So we've talked on the Big Mountain, NIU moving football into one conference and, moving your other sports into another conference that's more geographically kind of centered around your location is maybe kind of revolutionary or evolutionary, where we might see other schools, if it works out well for you guys, we might see other schools doing this as well. So what's the feeling there? Do you get the feeling you're kind of the guinea pig on this kind of experiment? And what's the reaction both internally and externally? Are other ADs coming to you and asking you, how's this working? And what's the reaction internally about being in two different conferences?
Yeah, that's a great question. And even after our first talk, I received a plethora of phone calls, right? Okay, what was the impetus behind this? When did you think that this was going to be a priority? Well, I think I shared it with the call, and you did a great job with kind of teasing that out of me. I'll just say it from that end, but it started back in 21, right? We talked about the Klykov, the Pac-12, all of that, right? That started the ball going. And then at that point in time, I was always thinking, okay, all of our sports. I think sometimes you get myopic about, okay, we want to take care of all of our sports. And I had no problem with that, but I also knew that the benefit of NIU specifically was its football brand on a national level. I already knew we had that level of respect. Some people maybe needed to get reminded that we are pretty good in that particular sport. But for the most part, when you think about NIU and NIU football, there's a certain level of respect that comes along with that, and even more so after the Notre Dame win, and even more so after we went to the Orange Bowl and played Florida. I can go on and on the evolution of what that looked like, but I think that to answer your question directly, yeah, there's lots of folks trying to figure out, how did that work? Can you give me any nuggets of support, help? I've done as much as I can, but I've always put the caveat that this works for us because of our situation, right? If you think that this can just be boilerplated across all of G6, the answer is no. We have a unique situation being in Chicagoland, being in the third largest media market, kind of nestled in the cornfields, but just outside of the urban area with a very good football program. I can kind of go on and drill down about why this really worked. There are institutions that do look like us that could benefit from this type of model, but again, it's a heavy lift. I think people think that this is just falling in our lap. Like, it was like no work. I wish I would know the color of the sky that they live in, because that's not what has happened, right? There was a lot of man and woman hours to execute such a move. So I have to say that on your show, nothing fell in our lap. This was a really tough lift for our size institution and a commitment to the MAC. We walked away from the MAC originally, not during my tenure, but we did, and it didn't go too well. It just didn't.
Yeah.
This one had a special component because of all the landscape changes in college athletics. It was, if we didn't do this, inaction is action, because God forbid, something would happen institutionally and also to our program. So we needed to act in a very strategic way for the benefit of a long-term. This was a long-term move, not a short-term play. So I think ultimately those people got off of that mountain that this was a one-size-fits-all, and now we're drilling down to certain institutions that do look like us, and you can kind of see them sprinkled throughout the country. Excuse my dog in the background because she's here and he's very, very upset. So the issue really comes down to the fact that we are trying to manage that. And I've taken through some of my colleagues about what you need to look for. Okay. Finances, okay. it is what it is. We know we have to increase our number. This doesn't make sense if we do not increase our media rights number. Then it's the competition side. Can we compete at the next conference or the next situation? Then it's okay, we have a portfolio of other sports. Where do they go? What does that look like? Will they accept you? So there's a lot of different variables that go into the move. And I do think there will be folks that will pursue such a model because of the circumstances I just said. But then there's going to be others that say, you know what, that's not going to work for us. We might have to go something divisionally. We might have to take a look at football non-scholarship. We might have to do something different with our other sports. So it's really more about the fact that if you can do it, this is a great move. Again, taking the point from Army and Navy, they've done a really good job with the Patriot League, and look what they're doing with the American. And what had happened at Hawaii, which also really gave me the initial thoughts that, okay, that might be accepting to the Mountain West or Pac-12 or what have you, because it's currently being done. So because we weren't necessarily the first, I had the ability to kind of go out and spec out what would work underneath our conditions. But to answer your short, yeah, people wanted to know about this. And I've not been on the banquet circuit too much, but I've been with colleagues that have asked me really tough questions about what did you're at a public institution. What did you have to deal with? And I let them know. I said I had a full head of hair, and then this is what happened. This is what you look like after the end. And some people got a little scared about that, but no. In all jokingly, it was, yeah, this is a heavy lift. And kudos to my president, our board, our supporters, and obviously the Mountain West and Horizon, who looked at us and said, "Ooh, that's attractive. I like what I see with that, and I think we can make that happen." So that's a short answer. I hope I answered your question, but this was definitely a heavy lift, no question about it.
Well, I'd like to ask just a couple follow-ups about the Mountain West and where you're at with them. Of course, we're focused on the Mountain West, one of a few conferences that we focus on here. And at the time that we talked the last time was shortly after the invite and the acceptance of the invite, and at that point, you really hadn't had any tons of communication with the conference. And now, as you mentioned early on, you have, your deputy AD there has been involved. So I just a couple quick follow-ups on that. Obviously UTEP is joining here as a full member as well. Have you been, the two of you combined kind of partnered in those conversations, or hey, you're doing yours and UTEP's kind of doing their own thing? I guess that would be my first question. And then my second question is just, you mentioned, the name, it's the Mountain West, not the Mountain West Conference, but what other items from a conference standpoint have you guys kind of discussed with them in terms of media rights or, membership and all that kind of, if anything? I know probably right now it's a lot of the boots on the ground logistics. Let's get ready for July 1st. But just wanted to see if there's anything else there that you could provide.
Yeah, no, UTEP athletic director, we're close, and he's done a great job there, and he's a roll up your sleeves, get after it guy, and I would just tell you, we haven't had any joint conversation. Now we've been on industry type things, trying to navigate the college landscape. We've been on some calls together and everything else, but at the end of the day, when you get to a certain level of years in the business that I have, somebody, you might know a couple more people, right? And UTEP and its organization, its administration, they do a fantastic job. That was a real good get by the Mountain West, to be perfectly honest with you. That I played in some of my fondest memories as a University of Alabama football player. I played in the Sun Bowl. I know Juarez. I know what that institution can do and that will do. So I'm really comfortable there. But we've been really doing our own thing with the Mountain West, because we're just not members yet. And again, only having one sport, it's a little different than what's going on with the Horizon League, right? But I would say that the expectations of communication around scheduling, that's been there. And then, this issue of operational budget, it's in our agreement that we have a certain healthy operational budget for the football program. Well, we realized once we did all the due diligence behind it, we were very much where we needed to be, but we need to be a little bit more once that media rights money and other things come into play, so we can right size that. So at some point, there's going to be a medium operational budget. But I'm this guy, right? I'm this guy that talks about more money doesn't necessarily mean more wins. You can look at data right now. We just came up with something, I think, a day ago that shows you that we're able to do what we need to do in being one of the smallest operational budgets in FBS. So I don't necessarily, throw my banner up to say, yeah, we're fiscally responsible. We know what we're doing. It's just, it can be done. I hate throwing money after something, and then at the end of the day, you do not get what you're supposed to get. If that was the case, if money was the answer, everybody would have a national championship. And last time I checked, that's not happening across college athletics and college football. So I'm a big one of using those resources very strategically to execute at a high level. So just imagine when we get more resources, what that's going to look like. Right now, we're either 1, 2, or 3 in any conference. You could say MAC, you could say Mountain West, Pac-12, about winning consistently. I think some data just came out from 1997 to 2024. We're doing pretty good relative to win percentages, right? And that's even before. I've only been here since 2013. So you can see that the model works at NIU. What I've been tasked to do is to make sure we keep that thing going and winning, because I like doing that. I like winning academically and athletically, right? So what we're going to do with this move is even make it better for our football student athletes, and quite frankly, all of our student athletes, by virtue of being more regional with our Olympic sports, and then we'll continue to do what we do, win nationally with football. So we've had some of those real heart-to-heart conversations about certain levels of NIL or rev share and budgets and all of those type of things. They're going to have to be behind the wall and the curtain, so to speak, for that. But I can tell you that we're going to be competitive. We're going to come in and compete, and we're going to do everything we can to win championships day one. And with no question in our mind that we're not committed to doing that, else we would not have accepted the bid to go to the Mountain West. Why do that to sit there just to look at each other? That's not not what we signed up for. And our institution fully understands that that's the expectation. But we will do it fiscally responsible the way we have done it in the past, especially over the tenure that I've been here. So I hope that answers your question from at least that perspective anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'd like to maybe shift now to more kind of broad, if you will. Obviously, you're the NACDA president here. Would love to hear just kind of where a lot of different things are at in the landscape right now. I mean, one thing is, I believe and I'd love to hear from you on this, but the kind of the changing role of the athletic director, that's probably always kind of been there. But now, and we've talked to many athletic directors, and you hear them just speaking about they're now maybe fundraising more than they ever have had to, selling, if you will, their athletic program, being an advocate, going to Capitol Hill. We've seen that here as we get into maybe some sort of congressional action. I want to talk about that here in a little bit, but and for you, like an innovator, we just talked about you kind of being at the forefront of splitting football away and what that looks like. You just mentioned that. So where do you see the role of an athletic director today, and what may be coming here in the not too distant future?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, NACDA has been a real big piece of that. The National Association of Collegiate Director of Athletics, NACDA, just to make sure I get that right. A lot of
Yes.
people ask, what does that stand for? Well, that's what it stands for. But the reality is that it's the practitioners. It's the ones that are doing the work, right? The one at the front line. And I think ultimately, having grown up in the organization and been in different roles at different points of my life, I have to credit Mike Cleary, who's the godfather of NACDA, who actually is the one that's mentored me. And before that, Jim Livengood, who was a former athletic director at the University of Arizona and UNLV, and he's been at the number of other places as well. But they brought me in the organization, and again, it's about being a practitioner, and quite frankly, it's about the student athlete experience. A lot of us who have started in the business, we're either a student athlete, coach, or some type of connectivity to college athletics or athletics in general. And I think the association is built upon professional development and networks, as well as making sure that this skill set is continued throughout the decades and eons, right? So NACDA's played a major role in a lot of the legislative controls, a lot of the meetings, a lot of the building a better mousetrap, and so forth around fundraising and all the different things that go on to make up a athletic department relative to facilities. And so it's the umbrella organization to all of the professional associations underneath that umbrella that make up college athletic administration. Okay, so that's kind of the stage. I think the practitioner role has changed a number of times. Okay, and I think right now a lot of folks are trying to figure it out, and some folks who are really not really clear about the mission, the role, and the historical nature of NACDA and the practitioner are going upon themselves to say, you know what, we're going to blow the whole thing up. We'll bring a professional person in, and then they're going to run the financial entity of it, and maybe they'll take a look at this and they'll take a look at that. And I think that's a dangerous thing in the sense that you still have to do the job. And the job is making sure that student athletes have a quality experience, that you're doing it the right way, you're not compromising standards. And quite frankly, the multiple sports that you have within the organization, in our case is 17, if you take that professional mantra, and there are professionalized things within this new structure that we're dealing with rev share, NIL, transfer, all of that. There are components of it, but no place who manage is a multiple sport entity like a college athletic department, because again, you've got all of these different sports, and when you're dealing with a professional situation, you're dealing with one sport. It's a different type of mentality around the quality of experience when you have multiple sports underneath one umbrella and you're only catering to maybe one or two of those sports underneath that multi deal. And you have to manage all the rules and regulations because you're dealing with higher education at the same time. So it's really, really important that you pay attention to that and have a practitioner that understands the programmatic development of what that looks like. You can tease out football, tease out basketball, tease out whatever revenue producing entity on your campus. But the reality is that gymnastics and tennis and all these other need the same amount of care. Because like my mentor said to me at one point, any of the sports can get you fired, Sean. You just ignore one or two of them too long and you will find that out quickly.
Yep.
And he was very true about that.
Yep.
The same amount of energy that I have to give into programmatic development of the gymnastic teams, I need to do that with football. Okay. And it's vice versa. So I think it's important that from a practitioner standpoint, we don't lose our way. I do think we have to adapt new skill sets and meld the old with the new to come up with the now. Okay. And I think that's a critical component because a lot of people want to say, let's bring in this fundraiser from the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball. And I'm not saying it's not going to work, but the data suggests differently. The success ratio for that has not happened. It's been okay. It's been great in this area, but they forgot about this. And all of a sudden they're on news at 11 or in a local newspaper about something that's gone wrong. So it's important to make sure that you can continue to adapt skill sets to the ever-changing landscape of college athletics. And that's what we're dealing with right now. We got caps, we've got transfer, we've got rev share. We have a lot of these things that, quite frankly, we need to adjust our athletic departments so we can focus on that so we continue to move forward. We have things like private equity and private capital. What does that really mean? Can that work for us? Does that work for a state institution or only for a private institution? These are things that, quite frankly, you need to meld the old with the new to come up with the now. And I think it's really critical as a practitioner and someone who sits in this role to be able to give that advice to the chancellor or president or board to give them perspective. All right. That's what's changed in college athletics. The newness, the different congressional intervention pieces, the landscape, not the fact that you have to not pay attention to the program development pieces that, quite frankly, are still a part of the enterprise of college athletics. So I don't know if I gave you too much or too little, but that's really, from a working class Joe that I am, I see this and it's slowed down for me because of my experience level, but it also tells that I've got to be even more intentional of telling the new breed of athletic director that there's no such thing as standing still. You're either moving forward or you're moving back, and your skill set needs to develop over time to meet the needs and the expectations of this new college landscape.
Fantastic.
Well, a follow-up question on that, AD Frazier. you talked a lot about really the ADs. They're the practitioners. They're the ones that make the trains run on time. They make sure all the gymnastics team, the fencing team, whatever, the golf team gets where they need to go to compete and gets back in time for classes Monday morning.
Mm,
But I want to ask you, kind of in not so much NIL and all of that other stuff, but in the world of higher education, we keep hearing about this enrollment cliff. It's a
mm.
huge thing. A lot of schools across the country are worried about that. So I wanted to ask you, do you feel, I don't want to say pressure, but just maybe an increased level of responsibility to, we talk about athletics being the front door of the university for a lot of schools. So do you feel like your athletic department, are you part of the administration's kind of strategic vision to combat possible declines in enrollment and help increase in enrollment? Where do you feel your role falls within that?
Yeah, if you're sitting on, and I'm a vice president, so there's some ADs who are director of athletics, there's some ADs who have a associate VP or VP title. I sit around. I serve for the pleasure of the president, and I sit on cabinet, or senior round table as we call it. And yeah, our president is very progressive. We do have our meetings, and I look at myself as an ambassador to help out the institution, not just for athletics. Athletics is really important and central part of my job responsibilities, but I also have recreation. I have the band that reports to me. I have a convocation center that has concerts. So my portfolio is maybe a little larger, or a little different than some who maybe just deal with the ICA, the intercollegiate athletic side of things. So I see myself as an ambassador of that process and helping the student athlete experience what that looks like, right? I teach classes, I lecture. We have sports management undergraduate, we have a sports management grad program here. I lecture in both. So there's a total component of integration of who I am as an administrator. I happen to be also the director of athletics. So it's important to be able to provide that insight for my colleagues that sit around the table that have different disciplines, and then also too for both the community as well as the external community outside of our local community that I represent in a way where it represents NIU the right way. So I think it's important to make sure that you can communicate that and also be an ambassador of the brand that is NIU, not just NIU athletics. So I'm really passionate about what that looks like, even down to, cardinal and black. Some people call red and black. It's cardinal and black if you know your history of NIU. And you also know the traditions that go along with NIU. I've been here 13 years. If I don't know the traditions now, I'm in trouble, right? I do need to know some of that. You need to be able to sing the fight song and know the words. So these are all things that are part of the responsibility of a vice president in my capacity, as well as honoring the role and making sure our board of trustees and our president feel quite confident of my ability to represent the institution if they are not there. All right. And they assign me that task. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think it's important of the practitioner to be very visible in support of the institution first. And then the cog of athletics is obviously a part of the alignment of the overall portfolio of what you do. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about. I'm going to maybe put two pieces together that I think fit, but you can kind of go at any direction you want here. I think we're just seeing a continuing widening of the gap between the power programs. I'm not going to define that other than saying the power programs
Yeah.
and the group programs, if you will.
Yeah.
You mentioned budget early on. Clearly, that's probably the main driver of this. The budgets, in some of the programs are just growing, leaps and bounds over what other programs are able to do. And so with that, I kind of would just love to hear from you on that gap and that widening potentially of the gap, and how that affects rev share and NIL, and what, if that gap's continuing to widen the budget, how is that impacting this new NIL rev share environment as well?
Yeah, it is what it is. I don't like the words too, group of five, power five. I try not to use it. I
Sure.
went to the autonomous five. It's just exhausting to keep up with all the different, to be perfectly honest with you, because I've been doing this for a minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, the gap the gap was continuously widening, and it will. And it really is defined by a couple of things. It's defined by, how much legislative voting privileges that maybe a conference has, and we do know that the power or more resource or higher resource institutions have a larger voting command. You've seen that in the college football playoff. Now we see that in some of the championships and the other types of things. So that gap is getting wider, mainly because school, like conferences like the Big Ten are more than the Big Ten, right? They're more than 10 institutions, right? And then we're starting to see these massive media and financial outlays of cash, and those are major war chests for institutions to have to outspend and do things. We see that in political elections and other types of things. The more money you have to spend, the more that you can paper the world about your message and why you should be who you need to be. So I think it's important that the other group of institutions that are lower resourced, I'll say it that way, they need to band together. And I've said this, not to paint the picture of gloom and doom, but if we do not unite at this moment in time to be able to make sure that our interests are met, we will be in trouble, regardless of what I can do with getting us into another conference or not. The lower resource institutions need to get together to protect their interest. And that's just, that's commonsensical when you say it like that. But right now, some of us are worried about just what's going on our conference and not looking at the larger picture that, hey, we're already outspent. Now it's about the leverage to be able to have certain voting privileges for championships and the like, just for basic operations. And I hate to say it this way, from an NCAA standpoint, as we take a look at legislative pieces, can the NCAA protect us? Can they help us in this process? There's lots of questions about what they look like moving forward with some of the new things that are a part of the process with the House settlement, the SCORE Act, some of the other broadcasting act that's being reviewed. All of these things are happening in real time as we speak right now. And without unification, without that support of working together, we will gradually cease to exist or not have the type of quality of experience that we've had in the past without unification of thought and protecting our interest. And I think that's where we are. The same way the higher resource institutions have done that based on their voting platform, finances, and quite frankly, influence. It's important to be able to unite on those issues just to keep a level playing field. I'm not even saying an advantage, just some level that we have a moniker of being able to compete and have a quality experience for our student athletes. So I think that's where we are right now. And it's really murky because sometimes it looks like that by voting for said legislative piece is going to help everybody, but you start unpacking it, you start folding the onion from the onion leaf, and you start to say, wait a minute, if we give up that particular right, do we have the ability to have the same type of championship experience? Do we have the ability to generate the type of financial resources necessary to keep our programs intact? These are questions that need to be answered in a way where it's not accusatory. It's more about protecting the interests of those institutions who, quite frankly, do not have the resources that some of the higher resource institutions do. So it's important to make sure that that you can verify what's being said, done, and quite frankly, operationalized at the next level. And I see some of us are really stuck into just competing with each other, against each other, instead of the unification side of it. And that comes down to institution to institution. And I think that that's what you're seeing behind the scene. Many of us, it's slowed down. It's slowed down for us at NIU. We understand where we are and we understand who we are. So now it's time to collaborate across the line for the best interests of our institution and our student athletes.
Well, there was just a meeting, I believe, that was reported here a couple of weeks ago for the non-autonomous FBS conferences. Is that a step in the right direction? We don't really know. I don't think what exactly they talked about, but hey, to your point, is it looking like we're trying to these non-autonomous conferences trying to get together to exactly what you said there? Are you seeing some of that from your viewpoint?
Yes, I do. I know that I've had a number of meetings with colleagues that look like NIU, and as far as institutional similarity, and I think it's more than just talk. I think before all of this change, it was a lot of talk, and people would go back to their conferences and do what they wanted to do.
Right.
I think there's a little bit more collaboration because the fear of, and quite frankly, the transparency of change is definitely an indicator that if you do not make that change, it can be very costly. Not necessarily of one's job, but really about their ability to give the experience necessary for the student athlete. So there's definitely a ramped up intentionality that's involved right now than it was just a couple of months ago because of these fine print that we have to take a look at these different things that are trying to be passed, where people are saying, hey, what does this mean that they get that antitrust exemption? What does that mean? So there's a lot of a conversation about the impacts of particular groupings based on the legislative conversations that we're having. And I think that's fair to have that. But then the next step is, what are we going to do about it? And how do we make sure we protect our best interests? So, yeah, to your point there, absolutely. I do think there is some sincere effort on the part, especially the institutions that look like NIU, that are having some of these conversations, because conversations at the higher level have been happening a long time. I happen to know because I haven't been at maybe one or two of those institutions myself.
Well, that's great to hear. I'm glad to hear that, and hopefully that continues. Go ahead, Steve.
So, quick follow up on that. And I mean, like you mentioned, you have a lot of experience. You've been different places. You've worked in the Big Ten, the richest conference in the the United States. You've worked within the MAC, who is maybe one of those lower resource conferences. So there's people with money, there's people with less money. But people, ADs move around and they work at a whole bunch of different places. So my question for you is, we've established ADs. You guys are the ones that have to make sure kids get to class, they get to where they're going. You guys make everything happen. You are the practitioners. Do ADs have enough voice in this whole process? We see university presidents who are making over $1 million a year, making these decisions. We see TV executives making a lot of decisions. I know in the Big Ten there was a lot of pushback from athletic directors against Kevin Warren, the commissioner. He made the decision to bring in these West Coast schools, and the ADs were like, "What the heck is going on? How do we make this work? Why are you not consulting with us?" So I'll ask you, do you think ADs, the people who actually have to make things work, get enough voice in this process?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think that it's well astute. I do believe that the athletic directors have changed, and at the end of the day, institutional vote comes from chancellor, president, or board of trustees. That's ultimately the governance structure for any type of change. We're one cog within a number of folks that make decisions. Now, our job is to advise. This is the direction that we should go. There's not one AD that's made a single major decision without the support of the president or chancellor and/or board of trustee or board of regent. But I will say, in this collaborative way, the AD's voice, the practitioner's voice, is really important because of the day-to-day operational impact of said decision. So I would always vote for the AD to at least be engaged in the activity. I don't have an ego about who makes the decision. I think it's a collaborative decision. When we make a decision, you would want all voices to be able to chime in for the betterment of the institution. That's why you have a hierarchy of a director of athletics. But I'm not naive to understand that, everyone, certain pay grade and responsibility need to be engaged in that activity. So I'm going to always err on the fact that the practitioner should have a real clear voice and articulate that up and down so everybody understands what's going on and what's the impact of said decision. If you like it or not, it's still important to be able to engage in the level of discourse where we all understand if we make this decision, this could happen, good, bad, and ugly, depending on the scenario. So I do think that AD, because of the practitioner frontline status, should be given that level of respect about hearing it out. Now, if you do anything, that's institutions have to be able to deal with those type of hierarchy. I have a really good relationship with my president, my board, my staff, my people, and it's important to be transparent. Transparency for me is really important. If you do not have that and engage folks in the decision, people think you're hiding something. Well, people are already thinking I'm hiding something. I haven't even said anything. And the more information I give, they still think I'm hiding something. But just imagine if I didn't go out the route of trying to explain. That's why the piece that we had on our, PowerPoint talking about why we made the decision, we went so detailed in it because people needed to know it wasn't just for more money, more media money. It was a whole different piece. And if you missed that, oh my goodness, please come call me up. I'll walk you through it again. But I think it's really important for the practitioners to at least be engaged in the conversation. Then the president, chancellor, board, what have you, can then turn around and make said decision. If they are not engaged, that's probably not the best thing for the institution because that person is generally on the front line of some of these decisions. But by no means AD should be making that solely by themselves. I don't think that's good best practice for an institution, especially on decisions like, leaving conferences or rev shares. All these decisions need to be worked together, presidential board, because ultimately we're all going to be held accountable, good, bad, or ugly, once it comes back. So it's important that we have that level of discourse back forth, and we do the best thing to help the institution grow. So,
well, appreciate all your time. I have a couple more questions
yep.
here, and again, you're giving us so much of your time. Thank you so much. The last time we talked, we didn't have any sort of action on the House settlement. We didn't have this new governance model. We now have some of these items answered. And I don't want to judge what has happened. We know what has happened. And we've talked, we feel like there's a three-legged stool that needs to be built. Obviously, the House settlement was leg number one. The new governance was leg number two. Again, I don't want to judge what those are. They are what they are at this point. And the third action or the third item for this stool to kind of bring us to a new environment is congressional action.
Yeah.
So I just would love to hear from you, your opinion. We don't have to talk details of the SCORE Act or anything like that, but your thoughts on congressional action, whether it's needed, and if it is, like, to you, what are the most important parts to get answered within that congressional action?
Yeah, this is tough for me because I really do believe in our system of governance. It's what makes America the most powerful and the greatest country in the world, and I can say that. My father was in a number of conflicts across the world. He passed away a few years ago. A proud American. We'd say anything against America, all of us would be in big, big trouble. So we've learned to respect the red, white, and blue and what it stands for. So I love my country. I love it dearly. And I think congressionally and what's happening in America right now, it's important that we take a look at some of these things. So I'm a proponent for some congressional intervention and others not so much, right? Depending on the scenarios. But I do think that this issue with NIL, and having a national standard is a must, right? We got to get on the same place. We can't have a law in the books in the state of Illinois and then another state have zero, nothing. There's not a fairness doctrine that helps college athletics out when that happens. So that one's one that we talked about last time, and we need to get there, right? Mm-hmm. And then all these antitrust immunity issues. Some are important and some maybe not, right? But I think there's like a lot of trade-off. I'm not a politician. I know a lot of politicians. I get that it's necessary to have some trade-offs. If I give you this, you give me that. All the backroom stuff. Right. But I think ultimately, when we're taking a look at congressional immunity or antitrust immunity, we need to make sure we get that right before we put that into play. And right now, I think we have some competing interests right now, especially with the SCORE Act. Taking a look at the SCORE Act in principle, but then taking a look at in totality what that looks like for an institution like NIU. We need to really drill down before we just pass something that on, and it could affect us negatively, and we need to be protected by that. So I don't want to go any further than that. I'll just say that I invite congressional intervention, but when it comes to something like this, let's make sure that we get it right and that we're not trying to pull it apart because it did something, right? So I think that that's something. I also think that we have the laws on the books that are ineffective. I totally agree with what's going on in Congress and the Senate relative to taking a look at certain laws, and we need to modernize them, just like we did with the NCAA. You need to modernize them. That's why we are where we are relative to NIL and rev share, right? We waited probably a little bit too long, regardless of your take about where we are with compensation for our student athletes based on their name, image, and likeness, right? So I don't want to have to revisit that, but also too, as an innovator, somebody who's in the front line, some of these things are, self-explanatory, or some of the things we know that we're going to be dealing with litigation if we don't pay attention to it. And we're going to be wrapped up in litigation. It's going to be emotional, and we're going to really lose the experience of our student athletes and the enterprise of college athletics. So I think there's a place for congressional intervention that gives us the autonomy, but also too gets it right. Why do we have a review of a call that might not have been right when we look at video replay? Because we want to get it right, right? We want to get it right. That's why it's a part of the game now. All right. So I think it's important that we made adjustments over time to do that. Wouldn't you think that congressional and other types of things have changed so we can get it right? It's the time to do it. It's time to modernize some of these things, not just to do it, but to actually do it with a purpose of making it better. Okay. Now, then it comes down to your interpretation of better and my interpretation of better might be based on politics. I'm not trying to get there. I'm trying to get to, we know that we have an unlevel playing field. We talked about the NIL and not having a federal, law across the books. There are other things like that in college athletics that we can get to and fix to make it better. And I think that's where I am with congressional intervention and taking a look at certain laws on the books and certain interventions so we can make college athletics better. So I hope I answered as much as I can without going into too many details, but I do think there's a place for that because I think there's a lot of smart folks in Congress and in the Senate that, have been former student athletes who understand what the impact are, who get it, who want this enterprise to be better. We know when the NCAA was founded, okay, the flying wedge. That's why it was created, because they were worried about people killing themselves running down on the kickoff. Well, things have changed since the flying wedge, okay? So it's important to continue to modernize the enterprise so we can take the good and the old or what have you, meld it to get the now. And I think it's really critical that we as practitioners and those who are in leadership roles take personal responsibility for that. So we can get to a point where we're not constantly in this mold of defending actions and more about bringing to the enterprise innovation that makes the enterprise better. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Love it. Last thing, I know we're just about out of time. You made some comments, and it's not the first time you've made these about the transition or transfer portal. I'm sorry. So just two quick questions. I know we don't have a lot of time left. First of all, there's been a lot of discussion now about making only one transfer portal. Would just love to hear your thoughts on that instead of having two here. And then the bigger question I have for you is this transfer fee that you brought up, and just overall, again, high level, your thoughts on that in terms of who would be paying that fee, if you have an idea on that, or if it's more just kind of a, hey, this is something I think we really need to look at, because we've mentioned guardrails, and we're starting to get some guardrails, and maybe this is another guardrail that's needed.
Yeah, popular or unpopular, it's his time, right? We're talking about money transferring hands. We're talking about raiding rosters. We're talking about doing things that's unscrupulous. We're trying to put guardrails up to keep the ecosystem of college football, college athletics intact. These are all things that are just options, right? I'm not saying that it's the end all be all, but it's another guardrail that helps us. And, probably obviously not very popular for folks that have to pay the fee, but I think it's important that you give some level of support for those institutions that are developing said talent. And someone comes in and says, "Hey, let's do something different." I have no problem with the student athlete going on for greener pastures in their viewpoint or a better situation. Matter of fact, hey, if you can do that, do it, right? My only thing is that to keep the ecosystem going, that we have some type of checks and balance when it comes to financial compensation to be able to do that. And that shouldn't come from the student athlete. That should come from the institution that the student athlete is transferring to. It's almost like a developmental fee. It's a fee to say, hey, you did a really good job with that individual. That person would work really well at my place. Thank you. I appreciate that. Oh, by the way, here's this percentage of X to be able to help you. Maybe you can do it again and I'll come back. I'll come back for another to see if that works for you. But it keeps the ecosystem going and it gives you the chance to compete. It's not a full number. It probably is not going to even really overall affect. But what it does is that it replenishes the pot. We can go back out and give somebody else another opportunity and develop. It's almost like an homage to say you did a great job with that three technique. I'm using an example in football. That defensive lineman looks pretty good. You did a great job with that. He's coming to my place, and thank you very much. Well, thank you very much should follow with, here's some compensation, here's some dollars. Go do it again. It keeps the whole ecosystem. This is a new system. So we're fine with that. You're going to go to the NFL from NIU. You're going to go to NFL to some other institution, but on the way, you might hit 2 or 3 of these institutions and keep that ecosystem going. So I don't want the money coming out of the kid's hand at all. I want that student athlete to get the full benefit of their experience. This is something that should happen through whatever means necessary to keep the ecosystem so it'll stop the poaching or the unscrupulous things that are happening behind the scenes with third parties and all the other stuff that you hear about. I'm not saying that's happening at NIU, but I'm quite sure you can read between the lines. I think what I'm looking for at this point in time is to make sure we make this system the best it can possibly be. And that's one method. And we're starting to see that with different aid agreements and different NIL agreements now that's starting to come into play. You know, the whole issue of collective bargaining. That's another thing. Going back to your last question, could we use some congressional intervention if that works to get to collective bargaining so we're not having all these different things happening? That would also be another thing. I know I missed that on the last question, but that's another situation that we need to take a look at right now because that's real in what's going on college athletics right now, especially in the sports of football and men's and women's basketball. So I think that's where I'm at with it. The transfer fee or the transfer, the developmental fee. I'll keep on beating on that drum. Obviously, not very popular to some people because that means there's some extra dollars they have to pay. But I think it puts those guardrails up that we just don't have right now. And then, we're seeing it with my basketball team. I have a completely new roster. And that's just the way it's going to be. I can't complain about that because that is the status of what we are right now in college athletics. But what I got to do is find the resources to be able to refill that and continue the process. And that's not just happening at NIU, that's happening across the nation. So I think I beat that up a lot, but I do think that we do need some help and guardrails. And these are some of the times now, and I can just be public and say, you just need to pay me. Just pay me the money. It's okay. We understand you liked him or you liked her. Just pay me the money so we can recycle the thing and keep it going. And maybe at some point, you at your place, you'll start developing like you won't need to come and take my players. It is what it is. But I do understand why you're doing that. Right. And I'm fine with it. And you can go and do that, but there needs to be some type of reciprocity in the process. So that's where I'm at.
Appreciate that. And we appreciate all your time here. Always enjoy talking to you.
I got to get one last question in.
Okay.
So last time we talked, AD Frazier, I'm the Big Ten guy, and we're both hockey fans. Okay.
Yeah.
We talked about your time in the Big Ten and how you helped. I think you were working with Coach Alvarez when the Big Ten hockey conference was being created. So I got to throw this one out to you. Recently, when we talked a little bit about this before, the investments that the Big Ten has made in hockey, it's changed the landscape of that level of hockey and for players of that age. Recently, I'm a Penn State fan. Penn State just signed a real big player, large NIL contract. So I want to throw it out to you. Just NIL is usually looked at as very negative, by everybody. But I want to throw it out to you as someone who was involved in that process of creating the Big Ten hockey conference. Can we look at this as a good thing possibly that NIL is creating other opportunities for student athletes, maybe not just in football and basketball, but we've seen women's gymnasts, we've seen women's soccer players, volleyball players, now hockey players getting NIL contracts, and that's maybe changed some other sports for the good. So can you just give me 90 seconds on your thoughts on Big Ten hockey, NIL, and how that maybe affects some Olympic sports?
Yeah, I'm going to tout my conference in Western Michigan, national championship winners.
Yes.
That's a great example for you because no offense to the Western Michigan, I've been in a total of 3 or 4 different hockey conferences in the country. I've been in Hockey East. I've been in ECAC. I've been in WCHA. I've been Big Ten Hockey League, and I've got I was the chair of the men's hockey committee. I brought the Frozen Four to Tampa, so I have a bit of a pedigree and experience in this area. And I would say you're right. It's changed. Look what Western has done.
Yeah.
Coming from virtually unknown. They've always had an ice hockey program, but they stepped up. They have major donors, and they went out there and they assembled the team through NIL. Let's just call it what it is.
Yep.
And they went in there and they were the #1 ranked, all 2 and 3 through the whole season, and they won the national championship.
Yep.
And that's a great example how NIL, as well as commitment to the sport, is going to reign supreme. So when I was there, when obviously Pagula put together the $88 million for Penn State, I remember that was the final straw that was necessary for the Big Ten Hockey League at the time. Jim Delaney was involved, and we're all involved. And to be perfectly honest with you, that set the standard. And it's a great, your coach at Penn State. We served in the same committee together. He's a fantastic recruiter. And I think that those are the types of things that can happen in all sports that can make it really special for institutions. So I use Western Michigan as an example, but honestly, all sports, gymnastics, you could just name it, where if there's a commitment there from a financial standpoint, right now, somebody can get good, real quick, if they want to be really specific and strategic on adding resources to make that happen. And Western Michigan is a great example of that. I'm not saying that they, bought their team or there was something that was done that was nefarious, because it wasn't. It was done perfectly. They got great commitment, they have a great AD, they've got great supporters there. And what they did is they assembled it and they showed the country that we are who we are, and they skated with the national championship. That opened my eyes as a former hockey guy looking at that, saying, wow, you know what? Could that have happened in another era? Probably not.
Right.
Probably not. But in this era, it can happen. So, that's a great example for folks that are sitting back out there saying, we want to get good in something quick. Well, you can. You can with the commitment. So they did a great job, and I think that other sports can follow. And I think you're going to see that. I'm not the sky's falling. I think there's going to be certain sports and certain institutions that say, you know what, we want to be really good in X, and we're going to be really good there, and we're going to put our money and our support to that, and you're going to see it right away. I watched this weekend Vanderbilt against South Carolina, and let me tell you something. Last time I checked, Vanderbilt looks really good. Now, could you have said that so many years ago, especially when I played in the SEC? I don't know. I'll just say that what I saw against South Carolina made me believe in the next era of college athletics, especially as it relates to commitment to NIL and rev share. That's what I'll say about that.
Great. Well, we appreciate your commitment to the Big Mountain here, coming back on for another fantastic discussion. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, I appreciate it, fellas. You do a great job. Thank you very much for your support of NIU. I think it's fantastic. You do a great job. When I do catch you, when I have a low point in my day, weekend, and you guys do a fabulous job, and you can count on me of adding to your apparel collection, because I need to get after it and send you some things too. So thank you so much. Have a glorious rest of your week. Fantastic. Go get it.
Hey, thank you so much. And for our NIU Husky fans, I'm picking all of the football games this year. I haven't started out real good picking the games, but I'm going to improve. Don't worry.
So I don't normally wear red. And AD Frazier, he made me feel better today because I'm not wearing red.
No.
I'm wearing Cardinal.
That's right.
Cardinal and black.
That's right.
That's so important to know your institution. So a number of alums have corrected me early in my tenure. I'm there now. You don't have to correct me now. But Cardinal and black, that's our color. So bless you for pointing that out.
Hey, thank you so much. Have a good evening.
You got it.
Again, thanks so much to AD Frazier for joining us here on the Big Mountain. Steve, what were your main takeaways there?
I mean, it's always awesome when we can talk to AD Sean Frazier. He's just, the amount of experience that he's had all over the landscape of college football.
Yep.
He brings so much to the table with his answers. And so it's always great to talk to him. And for me, seeing, again, talking to someone who, he's at a school where there may be the lower third of revenue schools in FBS, and he has to make a lot of things work, but he's also had experience in the Big Ten before, higher revenue. So he understands all the different things that all the different schools are going through. I just thought it was an interesting conversation, mostly just to his perspective. And he's an open guy. Like, he's a transparent guy, and so when he gives his ideas, he doesn't make it like, a political speech. He's just open and honest with his ideas.
Well, I appreciate it. We had him on about 8 months ago, give or take. And a lot wasn't known yet. That was shortly after, again, as I mentioned, the invite that they accepted from the Mountain West. But, that they've had ongoing communications. They're starting to build the branding and the budgets and that sort of thing. Also, I really appreciated, maybe in a follow-up you gave, about the model that they're using now. And yes, he's had a lot of ADs reach out to him about the pros and cons. Can this work in my situation? Maybe why it could or couldn't. I thought that was really interesting. Of course, we got into the governance pieces and the legislative pieces, and a lot has changed over the last 8 months. So much stuff we can talk about with him, because as you said, just he's been around a little bit, and he has that knowledge to kind of give a little bit of the pros and cons. Like, yep, and with the congressional stuff, he's like, yeah, we probably need action, but we want to be careful that we're really doing and hopefully going to be getting something that's benefiting and moving us forward, and not maybe handicapping us in the future.
I appreciated his candor about a couple items. One, what you just mentioned, the transition. They're moving moving their football program into the Mountain West. They're moving their Olympic sports into the Horizon League. We gave him a lot of credit for being evolutionary or whatever, and he said, yeah, it's good, it's working out well, we think it's the best for our school. However, it's a lot of work. He said it's a heavy lift, might not be right for every school. So I really appreciated his candor with that. And then also, I thought, he made a point. I'm not going to say he's calling out, but he made a point of, the rest of the, he didn't call him G6 or whatever, but the rest of the G6, we need to band together. We need to advocate together for ourselves as a whole when it comes to all the congressional action, stuff with the NCAA, all of that. Because if we're just, and he said basically, if we're just competing and picking each other apart, those higher, whatever you call them, autonomous for higher revenue, they're just going to do whatever they want with no checks and balances at all.
I appreciated that for him. And of course, he's got some knowledge being a NACDA president right now. I appreciated his comments there in terms of what does an AD look like here today, and what should they be, focusing on the practitioner side of things. So much good stuff there from AD Frazier. Always appreciate him coming on the channel. His second go around, and he is one of our Mount Rushmore guests, right? So he made our Mount Rushmore.
Does he know that yet? Did you?
I think he's aware. I'll be sure to send it to him again. But yes. So we appreciated him from coming on here yet again. I'm sure, we'll probably have him on here maybe close to, maybe summer next year, right? When they're starting to come into the Mountain West, see how everything is gearing up there for that transition. So, hey, we thank you guys for watching this episode. Make sure you smash that like button and subscribe if you like our content. We do everything Mountain West, Big Ten, Pac-12, have tons of AD guests and commissioner guests on. Hope you really appreciate our content. We'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.